This is just the start. A lot to talk about. Bob Baer, CNN intelligence and security analyst and former CIA operative, joins me. And James Phillips, Middle East analyst and senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation, who, by the way, his own writings were discovered in bin Laden's treasure trove. So, gentlemen, welcome to both of you. And Bob, let me just kick it off with what struck me most, his obsession with killing Americans and not as much furthering, this notion of an Islamic State. Let me just read part of what he wrote. One of his henchmen was this, quote, "You should ask them to avoid insisting on the formation of an Islamic State at the time being, but to work on breaking the power of our main enemy by attacking the American embassies in the African countries such as Sierra Leone, Togo, and mainly to attack the American oil companies." Why do you think, Bob Baer, he was so against this notion of expanding the Islamic State, unlike what we're seeing now?
Well, Brooke, I just look at the books he had on his bookshelf and what he had on hard drives. And this man was not, obviously he was never politically sophisticated, but I never realized how naive he was.
How do you mean?
Well, I mean, he was reading into all these conspiracy theories, even conspiracy theories about 9/11.
That's right.
I mean, if anybody knows who did 9/11, he was the one. So why was he even bothering with these crazy books? And, just the banality of it all, writing his family and not understanding the power of the Islamic State, he was not a sophisticated man.
Well, not necessarily all banal, considering, James, your writings were part of this treasure trove. Your paper, The Evolving Al-Qaeda Threat, apparently on bin Laden's must-read list. I mean, when did you just first hear about this as all this broke today, and what was your first response?
Well, I was shocked that he actually had it on his computer. I assumed that one of his acolytes found it and sent it to him. It was testimony I had prepared back in 2006 about the evolving threat posed by Al-Qaeda. And I was struck by some of the documents that were released that indicate that he was much more closely involved in the day-to-day operations and in offering advice to far-flung units than had been supposed back in when he was killed. And it's clear that although he isolated himself very much from his troops, that electronically he was connected through thumb drives and couriers, and very much in charge of many of Al-Qaeda operations.
Do you, James, let me stay with you, do you agree with Bob and this sort of notion that he is he was less than sophisticated? I mean, when you read some of the details about how he was this meticulous editor, writing and rewriting papers 50 different times, even talking about the CIA drone program and saying, hang on, maybe we should make trips around the Afghan-Pakistan border on cloudier days. Do you think he wasn't very sophisticated either?
In some ways, some of his choices of reading material was very curious, almost like it was pleasure reading for him to see, what stupid theories the infidels were coming up with on about who attacked on 9/11, or other ideologues came up with. And also, but the banality did come through, particularly when they mentioned some of the Al-Qaeda applications where they asked the candidates, what are your hobbies? Who should we contact in case you become a martyr?
That's right.
That was kind of eye-opening.
That's right. That's right. And then, Bob, you have the... I would never say the softer side, and I have a hard time even imagining this man had a heart. But when you read about these letters, looking forward to his son's upcoming wedding, hadn't seen one of his sons in a while, and was talking about, remembering how his eyes felt when he last saw his son, and reaching out to his wives. How do you read into all of that on the personal side of bin Laden?
Well, I keep on, initially I thought this for years, is just again, the unsophisticated way of looking at the world, thinking that taking down the World Trade Center would better the fate of Muslims. And he was a human being, whether we want to admit it or not, and he wasn't complete. But this is what's so worrisome about the Islamic State and bin Laden, is these are people with families, and they truly believe this apocalyptic view of the world. And I mean, how they get sucked into it is frankly incomprehensible to me, but they do. And bin Laden did have other choices. He had a lot of money at one time. He could have gone off to London and lived a normal life, but he really thought that he could change, alter history by, you know, a handful of attacks against the West. And of course, he turned out to be absolutely wrong. And I think if he'd really seriously read history, he would have figured out that this wasn't going to work.
Mm-hmm. But Bob, let me just end with where we began, and it was really my question on his obsession with attacking Americans and you know, saying, especially advice to AQAP, don't attack, you know, local police, which in fact wasn't necessarily advice that people took, and he didn't care as much about expanding this notion of an Islamic State, which we know now ISIS coming out of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Why do you think that so totally changed when you look at the evolution of terrorism now?
Well, I think you have to look at the Islamic State as Al-Qaeda 2.0, but in the sense that it actually believes that owning territory and taking the battle not so much to the United States, but to their opponents, the Shia Muslims, if you like, or the autocratic states in the Gulf, which clearly, after the fall of Ramadi, the Islamic State is doing a lot better than bin Laden ever did.
Bob Baer and James Phillips, thank you both very much. Coming up.
Thank you.